Welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We begin in Russia, where one of the country's warplanes dropped aviation ammunition on the Russian city of Belgorod in error, causing an explosion and damaging buildings. Local authorities reported a large blast in the city, which lies just across the border from Ukraine. The regional governor said 2 women were injured in the incident and a probe is underway. The Belgorod region is one of the several parts of southern Russia where targets such as fuel and ammunition stores have been rocked by explosions since the start of what Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says all NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will eventually become a member of the group, but the main focus now is to ensure the country prevails against Russia. Speaking ahead of a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, he also told reporters that once the war in Ukraine ends, Kyiv must be able to prevent new attacks. Mr. Stoltenberg's comments come after a visit to Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, where he met with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
I said in Kiev yesterday that Ukraine's future is in the Euro-Atlantic family, and all NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a NATO member. But the main focus now is, of course, on how to ensure that Ukraine prevails. No one can tell when and how this war ends. But what we do know is that when the war ends, we need to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself, that Russia is not able to continue to attack and to wage war again against Ukraine and to continue to chip away at European security. So we need a discussion about a security framework. We need, and there will be a discussion about, or there is an ongoing discussion about membership. Even, or also after the war ends, we need to support Ukraine, because we need to ensure that Ukraine has the military strength, the capabilities, the deterrence to prevent new attacks. Because you have to remember that the war didn't start in February last year. The war started in 2014 when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and when Russia for the first time moved into Eastern Donbass. I expect that at this meeting NATO allies, partners will announce additional support. And again, not only new platforms, but also to sustain the existing platforms. Just to have the battle tanks, you need an enormous amount of ammunition, fuel, trailers to be able to move heavy equipment like battle tanks, recovery vehicles.
In the meantime, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the U.S. and allies will discuss providing more air defense and ammunition for Ukraine, the defense in Germany. He says allies are committed to supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes and rejected what he describes as Russian President Vladimir Putin's efforts to carve out spheres of influence at gunpoint.
At today's contact group meeting, we'll focus on 3 key issues: air defense, ammunition, and enablers. And Ukraine urgently needs our help to shield its citizens and infrastructure and forces from Russia's missile threat. We reject Putin's grim vision of a world where tyrants get to assault their peaceful neighbors and try to impose self-declared spheres of influence at gunpoint. Together, we will defend the rules-based international order that keeps us all secure. And together, we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
And as Ukraine prepares to launch its much-awaited spring counter-offensive, troops near the devastated eastern city of Bakhmut are calling for more Western tanks and equipment. The 17th Tank Brigade has been operating Soviet-made C-64 tanks, some of which were donated by the Czech Republic and Poland, but some of its members have left for training with the Leopard 2 tanks in Germany. NATO countries, including Germany, Poland and Spain, have promised to send over 50 Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, while the United Kingdom pledged 14 of its Challenger 2 tanks. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry claims that it has hit what it refers to as the Bakhmut Central Command Unit of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov says the attack took place near a settlement located about 20 kilometers southwest of Bakhmut in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. He did not provide further details of the operation. Russian forces have stepped up heavy artillery bombardments and airstrikes on Bakhmut in recent days, with the Ukrainian forces holding out despite regular claims by Russia to have taken a major part of the city.
Task and Army Air Force, missile and artillery units of the Russian armed forces in the last 24 hours hit 86 Ukrainian artillery units, manpower and machinery in 127 areas. Near Kostyanativka, the Bakhmut Central Command Unit was hit.
And newly recruited servicemen for the Spartan Storm Brigade have been practicing target firing and battlefield first aid in an undisclosed location in Ukraine's Kharkiv region. Spartan is one of the new Storm Brigades, totaling 40,000 soldiers that Ukraine wants to use during a counter-offensive against Russian forces in coming weeks or even months. The new brigades, drafted by the Interior Ministry, will fight alongside regular army units, bolstered by new Western battle tanks and thousands of fresh troops trained by allies outside of Ukraine. And Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang has dismissed claims that Beijing is inflaming the situation in Ukraine and advocates a peaceful resolution of international disputes through dialogue and diplomacy. He made the denials during a speech at a forum in Shanghai, where he said that China is not taking undue advantage of the situation, but is adhering to the principles of mediation and dialogue to reduce tensions in the conflict and alleviate the situation. China has released a broad 12-point proposal to solve the Ukraine crisis while strengthening relations with Moscow. Beijing has repeatedly dismissed Western accusations that it's planning to arm Russia, but says it wants a closer energy partnership after boosting imports of Russian coal, gas, and oil. Well, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, efforts to transition to clean technology, and her recent trip to Beijing topped discussions when U.S. President Joe Biden recently held discussions with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The White House said in a statement the two leaders discussed the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The European Commission President visited China earlier this month to meet with President Xi Jinping.
We issued the president had a chance to talk to the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. They talked about her recent trip to Beijing. The president was interested in her perspectives being over there. They certainly talked about the need to maintain peace and security around and across the Taiwan Strait. Certainly they talked about ongoing support for Ukraine and the fight against Russian aggression. And again, they talked about how we can together continue to work with our European partners for a clean energy transition.
Meanwhile, the White House spokesperson John Kirby says the United States is yet to determine whether or not the Russian private military group Wagner is a foreign terrorist organization, despite its ongoing actions in Ukraine. He says the paramilitary group is still trying to take control of the city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine and is throwing a lot of prisoners' bodies at that fight.
Make no mistake, this paramilitary contractor that Mr. Putin increasingly relies upon is certainly continuing to try to take Bakhmut, for one thing, and they're continuing to throw bodies, a lot of prisoner bodies, at that fight. Mr. Prigozhin clearly has some personal gain here at stake in wanting to take Bakhmut, not only for his personal prestige and a way to try to maybe embarrass the Russian Ministry of Defense, but also for perhaps his own economic gain, since there's a gypsum mine there. Not entirely clear, but he looks like he's got more than one motive.
And Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during his visit to Havana as part of his tour of Latin America. During the event, the Russian Foreign Minister thanked Cuba for its support in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mr. Lavrov earlier this week visited Brazil, Venezuela and Nicaragua. Russia, hit by Western sanctions over the conflict in Ukraine, is looking to strengthen political and economic ties with other countries opposed to what it calls U.S. hegemony. Cuba, which has been under a U.S. economic embargo since shortly after Fidel Castro's 1959 revolution, has repeatedly expressed support for Russia in Ukraine and a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Let's get more on all these. The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins me now from Kiev. Anna, good to see you today.
Good evening.
Right, so a Russian jet has dropped a bomb on its own city of Belgorod near Ukraine. Do you think this was intentional or an accident?
Well, it looks like an accident because what I can say is that the area of Belgorod region and the city of Belgorod is very close to the area of Kharkiv region in Ukraine, so it's bordering Ukraine, and attacks on the territory of Kharkiv region and the city of Kharkiv are very regular. So Russian forces attacking Kharkiv region and Kharkiv and using different kind of equipment, and because of this close location to the border, this area is under very high risk. So it looks like that this might be a certain mistake or certain accident happening. At least Russian officials did not accuse anyone yet, at least in this accident, from foreign, from foreign forces. Let's put it this way. So it looks like an accident, and but again, we will have to wait until if there will be any further comments or announcements by Russian officials, because for the moment it was quite short announcement about the accidents with no details.
I was going to ask you if you've been hearing anything from Moscow that perhaps an investigation will be opened into the accident in Belgorod.
What we've heard yesterday, at least, that from the official military sources, that the fact that it was an accident, so there was no acquisitions at this point, but and basically Russian military officials did not provide any details on victims and sort of amount of damages. But Belgorod officials, local officials, they said that there are some victims and there are damages, and there are a lot of cars also damaged and even burned down due to this explosion. Because what we see from the footage that was released, that basically it was it was a hit first, and then it was additionally explosion at the point of the hit. So and we can see also some cars on the rooftops of the supermarket or whatever building is there in that location. So for the moment, this is what we have.
All right. So Ukrainian soldiers are preparing for a counteroffensive. They're being supported by the West. Do you think that the arrival of Western tanks, armored vehicles, trucks, and ammunition will give them an advantage over the enemy?
Well, tanks for sure will improve, improve dramatically the ability of Ukrainian forces, and this was one of the main main supply requirements from Ukrainian officials for a long time, and this tank discussion was going on for almost from the very beginning of this full-scale invasion. So it was really important and crucial supply request. But at the same time, Ukrainian officials say that in order to have real advantage at the battlefield and real advantage for Ukrainian forces to actually be able to conduct the successful counteroffensive as effective as possible and as successful as possible, Ukrainian forces also need air support and not only air defense support, while air defense is also extremely important, but also aircraft support that Ukrainian forces would be able to use at the battlefield. So it's really it would be correct to say that all the supplies which are already coming will definitely create certain advantage. However, according to Ukrainian officials, in order to have a complete advantage at the battlefield, it's also important to consider Air Force supplies, which are currently under, again, discussion, negotiation. But what we can see is that some countries have already started to supply Ukraine with additional aircraft, particularly with MiG aircrafts, which Ukrainian forces are aware of using.
So NATO's Secretary, General Jens Stoltenberg has reaffirmed that Ukraine will join the military alliance, adding that all the NATO allies have agreed that the country should be a member. This will change everything for Ukraine. If nothing else, it will embolden it. What kind of game changer will this be?
Well, you correctly said this would change completely Ukrainian future, I should say, because for Ukraine, the most important, if we imagined war, this particular war that started in 2014, if we imagine that it is ending, Ukraine needs guarantees that the same thing is not happening in 10 years. So Ukraine needs guarantees, and this is what security guarantees, first of all, and this is what Ukrainian officials are always constantly talking about, and also it was during the discussion between President Zelensky and Mr. Stoltenberg yesterday during Mr. Stoltenberg's visit to Kyiv, and definitely this is something that Ukraine has officially applied to, not because because this is the best way for Ukraine to get these security guarantees. At least this is official position of the government, and this is big time now, very desirable decision for which Ukrainian society supports. It's an incredible support by Ukrainian society of NATO membership, and it was never as high as it is now before in Ukraine. So definitely becoming a member state of NATO would be probably for Ukraine would be the best security guarantees for the future. And also we should consider that Ukraine is currently getting extremely unique experience at a real battlefield, and there is and also during the training with international allies, and then using this training at the battlefield. So not only with manpower, but also with different equipment. So basically, this is a unique experience, which also would be quite useful for NATO and NATO member states.
Anna, Russia is also not resting. It's continuing moves to strengthen ties with countries it regards as, its friends. What's Moscow likely to get out of, its recent tour of Latin America embarked on by Sergei Lavrov? It's visited Cuba, Brazil, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. I believe Cuba is the last country, or the present country that Mr. Lavrov is in right now.
Well, it's also quite understandable that Russia is looking for allies, additional allies, because what we can see now that Russia is quite isolated in terms of international relations, and this is not a surprise that Russia is trying to find some, additional ties in different parts of the world, and we've seen Mr. Lavrov also had another tour to Africa, Africa countries previously. So definitely, it looks like they're definitely looking for some additional possibilities for finding allies. But again, it's difficult to say if they're gonna get any success, any particular success, and any game-changing success. So we will have to wait and see how all this turn. But for the moment, there is definitely what we can see and what we can analyze from what's going on. It's definitely a try, at least a try to find certain additional support in different parts of the world. But again, it's never a guarantee that this would get successful or not successful. So we'll have to wait and see.
Anna, thank you so much for your time today on the program.
Thank you.